This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 658, entitled Masculist Talk to Women. Description. Masculists use the carrot and the stick approach to persuade women to become biconscious, to learn some masculist ideas. This flyer shows how it is in women's self-interest to become biconscious, since they are then more likely to have boyfriends, whereas feminists who remain stubbornly monoconscious will be rejected and forced to live lonely, miserable, manless lives, rotting on the shelf, as men, masculisted men, have nothing to do with them, ignoring them viciously, both socially and sexually. Now the flyer itself. Masculist Talk to Women by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Masculists want women to be biconscious, that is, be as familiar with masculist ideas as they are with feminist ideas. Nearly all women in today's world have been influenced by feminist ideas, that is, the idea that women should be given the same rights and opportunities as men, that it is unacceptable to be treated as second-class citizens by men. Masculists have no problem with these ideas on feminism and would argue that they are in fact prerequisites for the effective fipping of women, and hence the liberation of men from being man-slaves and being divorce-raped by women. Masculists want women to be biconscious, that is, to know some masculist ideas, since that will make such women a lot nicer to be with than with monoconscious feminists, who tend to be so feminazi bitchy that they are considered undateable by over 60% of young men in the US, according to a recent Pew Research Center poll, who refuse to date young women. A monoconscious feminist, by definition, has only had her feminist consciousness raised. The only gender politics that she knows is feminist. Feminism, as seen by masculists, by conscious masculists, is a deeply misandrist, gynocentric ideology that preaches to women that gender oppression is a one-way street, that women are the oppressed and men are the oppressors. Feminism teaches women absolutely nothing, in capital letters, about how women oppress men. Feminism is a childish ideology that promotes women to think that women have no role in causing women's situation, placing all the blame for women's situation on men. The typical monoconscious feminist is angry at men, since she has been taught that men oppress women, that she learns from feminism. Typically, she will learn that men are rapists, men sexually harass women, men are violent towards women domestically, that men have the power over women, that is, the patriarchy, that feminists want dismantled, so that women have a lot more power over their own lives. Monoconscious feminists do not have their anger at men cancelled by a corresponding masculinist anger at women for the many ways that women oppress men, especially with women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, women's forced fathering, etc., which are horrible and decades-lasting gender crimes against men, which are a lot more serious than the relatively minor ways that men oppress women. Hence, biconscious masculists see monoconscious feminists as hypocrites who lash out at men for the relatively minor ways that men oppress women, when in fact women oppress men worse, far worse. But due to feminists' typical monoconsciousness, they are unaware of how women oppress men, so feel, with their feminist consciousness raised of how men oppress women, that they have every right to be angry at men and to express that anger publicly, knowing that nearly every other woman who hears that anger will understand its origin and sympathize with the angry feminists. It is this suffocating gender political ignorance of the monoconscious feminists that the biconscious masculists are fighting against. Masculists are strongly motivated to teach women, to teach feminists, to teach society that gender oppression is very much a two-way street and that women oppress men worse. Hence, Masculists are strongly motivated to educate women into biconsciousness by teaching them masculist ideas. This flyer is largely about what strategies that Masculists can use to teach women to be biconscious. There are two main strategies that the Masculists can use, namely, in broad terms, the carrot and the stick. Feminists often use the carrot with women in pushing them to be careerists, saying such things to women that, quote, "When the divorce comes, which will occur to half of you who marry, if you are a FIP, if you have studied a STEM, that's science, tech, engineering, math, major, then you will be readily employable and hence can earn good money, since you will have a skill that the economy values and hence pays well for. So after the divorce you will not be poor and hence not be parasitic on the labour and money of a man." Masculists agree with the feminists on this score. Masculists place enormous emphasis on the fipping of women, placing strong moral pressure on women to fip up by getting career competent educations at high school and college so that they can be fips as adults and not expect fluffy style to parasite off the money and labour of a man, thus manslaving him, and for one farthing, 4 divorce raping him, thus destroying his life. Masculists have a hatred of fluffies and punish them so severely that we effectively exterminate them by forcing them to rot on the shelf, by being totally ignored by men, masculisted men, not even pumped and dumped, so that fluffy women die slow, miserable deaths, despised and rejected by men, masculisted men, both socially and sexually. This vicious rejection of fluffies by masculists is the stick approach taken by masculists towards women. Masculists consider fluffydom to be a huge problem, since the manosphere, that's men talking about men's lib on the internet, estimate that about 80% of young women choose to study fluffy crap majors, making them fluffy crappers, who will become fluffy parasites as adults, expecting some stupid, gullible, man-slavable man to work for decades of his life for some fluffy female who man-slaves him. Masculists are abolitionists who see fluffydom as man's slavery and man's slavery as slavery, and hence is hated and a war issue. The Masculists are at war against their two main enemies, the fluffies and the fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts. Masculists hate fluffies because Masculists see them as manslavers and divorce rapists, and Masculists hate fluffy feminists even more due to their hypocrisy and genocide. Masculists see fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts, who see men as cash machines and women as fluffies, as hypocrites, because these fluffy feminists want equal rights for women in the parliaments, but reject equal obligations on women to fip up and pull their financial weight by sharing the burden of earning the living equally with men, by bothering to become fips and not expect to manslave and divorce rape men. Masculists see fluffy feminists as genociders, since they have made divorce so toxic for men that in many countries now, over 70% of young men refuse to marry and reject paternity by refusing to give young women their sperm, thus crashing the birth rate and causing a growing panic amongst young women who are noticing in ever-growing numbers that this is the case. As Masculist and MGTOW ideas continue to spread across the planet, Young women will become ever more conscious that the young men they come across, with whom they want to have relationships with whom they want to have children with, will notice how reluctant young men are to marry and become fathers due to the toxicity of divorce and the monoconscious attitudes of the fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts, who butcher one father in 4, destroying his life, causing fluffy feminists to be hated by the Masculists. Masculists argue that it is very much in women's self-interest to learn some masculism, that is, become biconscious, for several reasons. One is that biconscious women are a lot nicer for men to be with, since a biconscious feminist is much less feminazi bitchy than a monoconscious feminist, who typically is angry at men for the ways that men oppress women. A biconscious feminist will have her feminist anger at men for the ways that men oppress women cancelled by her masculine anger at women for the ways that women oppress men, and in fact even worse than vice versa. By losing her monoconscious anger at men, she will be a lot nicer to approach, to date, and have a relationship with. Since most women want to have kids, they know that they need a man in their lives, since being a super mom, that is, being both a full-time careerist and raising very small kids at home simultaneously, is virtually impossible. So nearly all women want to have a man in their lives who can help pay for the costs of raising kids. So most women know that they need to be nice enough to a man that he sticks around. But due to the toxicity of divorce, most young men now reject marriage and paternity. So as masculine ideas continue to spread across the planet in a big way, resulting in the fundamental reform of the divorce courts, in the fipping of women, then more young men will be willing to marry and give women their sperm. So if women want men to be fathers, then these women need to become biconscious and help the Masculists to make society biconscious, so that divorce becomes much less toxic for men, so that the divorce courts are based on the principle of financial independence, assuming that all women are FIPs who don't need to be given the house, half a man's wealth and stuff, child payments, and worst of all, alimony until the ex-husband dies. Masculists push women to see the advantages to women of being FIPs so that they can be mothers again. Until society is a FIP society, young men will continue to boycott marriage and paternity, thus crashing the birth rate. Those women, those feminists who remain stubbornly monoconscious, who refuse to accept that women oppress men too, and in fact worse than vice versa, will be very heavily punished by men, masculisted men, by simply not getting one. Already, some 40% of middle-aged women live alone, manless, childless, miserable and depressed, and on antidepressant drugs. So Masculists are preaching to women, to monoconscious feminists, that is very much in their self-interest to become female masculists and push for the men-fairing of the gender laws so that men are prepared to be fathers again, or the two sexes will continue to polarize further. Masculists have a hatred of fluffies and fluffy feminists, aiming to exterminate them by total neglect. Masculists much prefer to have relationships with biconscious feminists, but still will not marry them nor give them their sperm until the gender laws are men-faired. For that to happen, the Masculists need the voting support of female Masculists to put powerful moral and voting pressure on the gender politicians in the parliaments to create men-fair gender laws. Specifically, the Masculists want the creation of GECs, Gender Equality Committees, in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male Masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are treated equally, which is far from being the case today, in today's gynocentric world, gender politically speaking. To create these GECs, not only must men vote for them, but so must a fair proportion of women, masculisted women. It is in these female masculists' self-interest to do so, since then men will be more likely to want to be fathers again. Millions of young men want to be fathers, but today's fluffy feminist-controlled divorce court system is so toxic, so misandrist, so monoconscious that the large majority of young men now refuse to marry and be fathers. So things have to change or we wipe ourselves out as a consequence of the crashing birth rate. So Masculists say to young women, quote, "Fit up. Become biconscious so that you are more likely to get a boyfriend, or if not, then you are more likely to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless and spat at for being a hated, monoconscious, feminazi bigot." That's MFB. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Brackets. Click on the Masculist tab for 650 plus Masculist essays and their videos. See also a London Reel interview on Masculism at "AI will kill 1 billion people, do we create our exterminators? Professor Hugo de Garis, London Reel. Brackets. See the last half hour of this 2-hour interview for the Masculist segment. These flyers are available in text and video formats on Minds, BitChute, Odyssey, MGTOW.tv and X. Ciao.